into a blank space. I want you to just imagine this for a second. You step into this huge, quiet map room. It's inside Fort Richardson, which is this high-security military base up near Anchorage, Alaska.
And the year is 1989.
Right, 1989. You're a counterintelligence officer. Your whole job is to know every single feature, every hill, every river, every square mile of this immense, rugged state. You're looking at maps that cover almost 700,000 square miles. I mean, a territory that just dwarfs most countries.
And then, in the middle of all that detail, all that, the meticulous cartography with the elevation lines, the water sources, everything, you see it.
Yeah.
It's this small, totally impossible blank space. It's no bigger than your thumb. And it's right in the middle of Denali National Park, which is like one of the most famous and well-traveled parts of the state.
And it's whited out, and it's got this specific, just infuriating note on it. This area not surveyed to date.
Which is just...
Yeah.
It's a red flag, a massive red flag. In a state that has been surveyed over and over and over by the U.S. military since World War II, a blank patch like that isn't forgotten territory.
No, it's a statement. It's a calculated physical, do not look here sign, a secret.
And that secret, according to this deep stack of sources we've pulled together, and we're talking military insider testimony, engineering logs, investigative journalism, even seismic analysis reports, it's just staggering.
It is.
It's a massive artificial pyramid, potentially larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza, buried deep under the Alaskan permafrost. And it's being secretly operated by the military, or maybe, and this is where it gets really wild, by something else entirely.
So our mission today for you is to take all this sprawling and honestly sometimes contradictory body of evidence and just break it all down. We're going to unpack the three main narrative threads. First, you've got the intelligence officer's discovery and the media blackout that happened right after. Second, the incredible testimony from engineers who supposedly worked inside this underground base. And then finally, the actual hunt for the physical location.
And after all that, we're going to get into a really rigorous, critical assessment of the evidence.
Yeah.
We'll try to figure out what, if anything, we can actually believe about this secret technology and, who they might be collaborating with.
Ready to dive deep?
Let's do it.
Absolutely. Okay, let's start at the beginning with the guy who found the hole in the map. Counterintelligence officer Doug Muchler.
So Muchler, as you say, he reports for duty at Fort Richardson in September 1989. He's from Ohio, assigned to the 172nd Infantry Brigade, and his mission is pretty critical.
Yeah, investigating espionage and terrorism across all of Alaska. To do that, to secure a state that massive and complex, you have to know every single inch of it.
And that work naturally takes him into the base's map room, a place just filled with these huge, detailed military charts. He's spending hours in there just getting the lay of the land, spreading these enormous maps out over the tables.
And that's where he finds the real anomaly. It wasn't, a strange mountain or a weird river. It was the deliberate absence of information that just jumped out at him.
And the location was so specific. It was on a detailed map of Denali National Park, about 60 miles west of Mount McKinley, which we now call Denali, of course.
He said the whited out area was about the size of his thumb on the map scale, but that designation, this area not surveyed to date, for an intelligence officer, that's just impossible to ignore.
It really is. This wasn't some, remote piece of ice-covered coastline. This was fairly central, Alaska, close to a major national park, an area that should have been covered by every high-resolution satellite, every survey plane the U.S. government has.
It just screams that the military didn't just not know what was there.
Exactly. It suggests they knew enough to deliberately redact it from the maps that guys like Muchler were allowed to see. It's a classic counterintelligence move, a secret so deep it requires an official but totally unexplained gap in the data.
So Muchler, he kind of files it away. He figures, if it's mission critical, the details will eventually come down through the official channels.
But the information didn't come in a memo.
No, it arrived on the 6 o'clock news 3 years later.
Right. So Muchler's memory, which is a key part of this we'll have to analyze later, places this event in late 1992. He's with nearly 40 other off-duty soldiers. They're all watching the local Anchorage news, and this just startling story breaks.
It was about an underground nuclear test that China had just conducted. A big one, testing some high-yield weapon.
But the key detail wasn't really the test itself. It was the physics of it. The explosion was so powerful that the seismic shockwaves literally traveled through the Earth's crust. It's like running a deep tissue scan of the entire planet.
And those waves reached all the way to Alaska.
And the seismologists, who are meticulously analyzing all this data, they're looking for these reverberations, these time delays. That's how they figure out the density and what's under the surface.
Yeah.
But in central Alaska, the data came back with something completely non-geological.
It was this sharp, clear cross-section of a massive manufactured object buried about 100 feet down, and the shape was unmistakable.
Triangular. Geometric. It was a pyramid.
And the size was just astounding. The news report claimed the structure was 550 feet tall, which, you have to realize, is bigger than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Giza is around 481 feet.
So you have this colossal artificial structure, thousands of years old, supposedly, hidden under the permafrost.
And for Muckler, this was the moment, the aha moment. He described this immediate, chilling recognition. He realized the location they were showing on the news map where the seismic anomaly was. It was the exact dead center spot of that little patch on his intelligence map.
The one labeled, not surveyed to date.
Exactly. The blank space had just been filled in, not by his commanders, but by a Chinese nuclear test.
And this is the moment where the story turns from just a weird geological find into a full-blown military cover-up narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. So Muchler and his buddies, they're watching the 6 o'clock news with this, mounting excitement. They know they've stumbled onto something huge. Muchler even tries to record the 11 o'clock news because he's expecting this big, detailed follow-up.
But the follow-up never came. The late-night broadcast, nothing. No mention of the seismic anomaly, no pyramid, no Chinese test connection. The story had just vanished. Poof.
So Muchler, he's an intelligence officer. He feels it's his duty to investigate what could be a massive national security leak or a cover-up. So the next day, he goes down to the local news station.
And the station manager was just aggressively evasive. Denied ever knowing about the segment, denied it ever ran.
But the cover-up wasn't perfect. Muchler says this younger, visibly nervous employee risked their job to confirm the truth. They pulled Muchler aside and insisted, yes, the pyramid story absolutely ran on the 6 o'clock broadcast.
But just hours later, the station got a visit from what the source describes as scary guys in suits.
The men in black.
Basically, individuals who were clearly government agents operating with extreme authority. They grilled the manager, they confiscated all the tapes, literally erased the physical evidence, and ordered the story pulled from every single broadcast going forward.
And the official excuse they gave was national security concern related to tracking the Chinese nuclear tests.
And the threat was unambiguous. Muchler and everyone else who saw that broadcast were told, in no uncertain terms, to forget the pyramid and forget the test, or they would face serious criminal charges.
And Muchler realized this threat was real, but that aggressive censorship just cemented his belief that the secret was profound and that the government was actively hiding something of colossal importance from its own people.
And the story takes another turn a year later, in 1993. Muchler gets transferred from Alaska all the way to Fort Meade, Maryland.
Which is the heart of the National Security Agency, the NSA. And crucially, Fort Meade is where they had this massive government archive warehouse, just rows and rows of classified files.
So Muchler saw his chance. He uses his top-level clearance, goes into the archive, and plays it completely cool. He knew he couldn't just ask for the pyramid file, right?
Yeah, of course not.
So instead, he requests information on archaeological sites in Alaska, which is a brilliant piece of tradecraft. It's vague enough to be granted, but specific enough to lead him right where he needs to go.
And the archivist comes back with a specific set of coordinates: a floor, a row, and a shelf. Muchler finds the files, carries them to a secure reading room, and he thinks he's finally about to get the answers he's been waiting for since 1992.
But before he can even open the first file, the whole atmosphere in the room just changes. Two individuals who just move with that quiet authority that screams high-level security just appear, standing over him.
The classic intimidating security presence.
And they didn't mince words. They just state, you don't have a need to know for that information.
And Muchler, he's infuriated by this, he argues. He demands to know why a counterintelligence officer with his credentials is being denied access to files that are officially just about archaeology.
And it's during this confrontation that one of the agents makes this fatal critical slip. He's warning Muchler that he has to leave the building immediately, and when Muchler presses him, the agent warns him. They don't want us messing with them up there anymore.
Okay, let's just pause on that phrase for a second. They don't want us messing with them. That just fundamentally shifts the entire nature of the secret.
It does.
It implies that the entity being protected isn't just a piece of military tech or some Cold War secret. It suggests there's an external, non-governmental, or at least autonomous third party involved here.
Exactly. And the agent realized immediately that he'd crossed the line, that he had revealed a profound truth that Muchler was absolutely not supposed to know. Muchler was forced out of the building, the files stayed unread, but the intelligence gain was huge.
Yeah, the U.S. military wasn't just hiding a structure. They were seemingly subservient to whatever entity was operating or protecting that structure.
So Muchler gives us this external view, the aggressive cover-up, the map anomaly, this hint of an outside party. But to understand what the military was protecting so fiercely, we have to go back decades, back to the very beginning of the operation through the eyes of the engineers who first went inside.
And this next section relies heavily on testimony that was passed down from two key people, Marty Johnson and Lee Pearson. It's relayed through their sons.
Yeah, and we have to note that critical caveat. These are secondhand accounts. We don't have the original logbooks or anything. But the specificity and the technical detail in these narratives, it really lends them a lot of weight.
Let's start with Marty Johnson. He was like the prototype of the brilliant mid-century engineer, served in the Navy during World War II, and after the war, he was immediately snatched up by giants like Western Electric and Bell Labs.
This is the era of the transistor, this revolutionary electronic switch. And Johnson was right at the cutting edge, specializing in electrical engineering in the late 1940s. He was used to working on national secrets.
But in 1959, he was brought onto a project that just felt different, even for him. He was flown thousands of miles from Omaha, Nebraska, all the way up to Unalakleet, this tiny community on the western coast of Alaska.
And from there, the cloak and dagger operation began in earnest. He was rushed onto a white bus. The windows were blacked out, and the bus was filled with other elite engineers and technicians.
It's textbook clandestine transport. You get immediate sensory deprivation. You have no idea where you're going, and there's absolute professional silence enforced on everyone.
They drove east, deep into the Alaskan interior, for 6 grueling hours. Johnson recounted that the ride was bumpy and long, just heading away from civilization and deep into this barren landscape of ice, snow, and mountains.
When the bus finally stopped, they were literally in the middle of nowhere, just absolute white all around them. The only structure visible was the simple, stark concrete shed.
And the shed was the gate. They were told to go inside, grab a rail, and hold on tight. It wasn't a building at all. It was just the top part of a massive elevator shaft. The platform just started dropping. And dropping.
Johnson, being an engineer, was timing it in his head. He noted the descent was really significant, which meant they were going hundreds of feet, maybe 1,000 or more, deep underground.
And here's a fascinating technical detail he remembered. He noted that the temperature actually got a little warmer as they went down, which is the opposite of what you'd expect, unless you're descending near a major geological hotspot.
Or near a device that's actively generating a tremendous amount of heat.
Precisely. When they finally got to the bottom, they stepped out into a space that was paradoxically completely mundane. Looked like any standard 1950s military facility. Gray concrete floors, green and beige walls, that inescapable low fluorescent buzz.
They walk through hallways lined with countless numbered doors, which suggests a vast underground complex that went far beyond just the main elevator shaft.
But the security just kept escalating. They got to the end of the line, and they were standing in front of this gigantic steel door. Marty Johnson estimated it was 15 feet high and wide and a foot thick.
This wasn't a vault for classified documents. This was a fortress built to contain or protect something absolutely massive.
And when that steel door finally started to swing open, Johnson described the view as just shocking. The door opened into a giant man-made cavern, and the officers guiding them finally revealed the secret. They announced, "Gentlemen, welcome to the Dark Pyramid."
So Johnson's account basically solidifies the claim that the U.S. military has known about and been trying to use this thing since the dawn of the Cold War.
And decades later, the security around this place only got more intense. We see that in the account from Lee Pearson, a retired veteran. In 1978, he got offered a gig by a pilot friend of his, a fast, high-paying supply run to a secret base near Denali.
The pilot, who clearly knew the area, gave him a very specific warning when they were about 5 miles out from the coordinates. He said their instruments were going to start acting up, and they'd have to switch to VFR visual flight rules, basically flying by sight.
But acting up was a massive understatement. The second they crossed that 5-mile line, the helicopter was hit by something huge. The electronics went haywire. Radar screens blanked out, The compass spun like a top, and then all power instruments, lights, radio just went completely black.
That sounds like a highly localized and extremely powerful electromagnetic pulse, an EMP. And that kind of thing is so dangerous because it can just fry modern electronics.
Right, the fact that their older, more analog helicopter could keep flying under manual control while being hit by this energy, it just speaks to the sheer scale of whatever power source was down there on the ground.
So they managed to land visually, and the scene on the ground was just total military lockdown. Pearson noted guardhouses, massive razor wire fences, towers, Quonset huts, and piles of heavy equipment everywhere.
And above them, a C-130 military transport plane was just circling tightly, which suggests continuous aerial surveillance of this whole exclusion zone.
But the security detail on the ground was maybe the most unsettling part. The ground crew wore these black uniforms with absolutely no insignia.
None at all. No unit patches, no rank, no name tapes, no ID. This is the ultimate form of deniability. If these guys are caught or questioned, they are literally untraceable to any specific unit or branch.
And their posture was openly hostile. They were heavily armed and aiming their weapons right at the helicopter while it was on the ground. And to really emphasize the threat, there was a parked Jeep with a loaded, manned .50 caliber machine gun aimed right at Pearson and the pilot.
They were not welcome guests. They were targets. They were on the ground for only 3 or 4 minutes, just long enough to offload the gear, and then they scrambled back into the air.
And just like the pilot predicted, about 5 miles away, pop. The power instantly came back. All the instruments snapped back to normal. When Pearson tried to ask the pilot about what just happened, the pilot just tapped his headset.
A clear signal that they were being listened to, even in the air.
But years later, in a quiet bar, the pilot finally opened up to Pearson. He confirmed the base was more secret than the Manhattan Project itself. And he confirmed that deep underground, there was a giant pyramid made of what they assumed was black stone, and that it was thousands of years old.
Okay, let's stop there for a second. Black stone, thousands of years old. If that's true, this isn't just a military secret. It's an archaeological secret that completely rewrites human history.
Absolutely.
Does the source material give any indication of how the pilot knew that? Or is that just, base rumor?
It's treated as pervasive base rumor. The engineers and the long-term staff who had been there since the 50s, they had concluded that whatever this pyramid was made of, it wasn't conventional material. And its age was just beyond modern human capability. They knew they were working inside a colossal relic.
And the purpose of this colossal, ancient, power-emitting relic?
The pilot claimed it was a power generator, a thing that puts out a lot of juice. Enough, he believed, to power the entire country. Which shifts the question from if the pyramid exists to, well, how it functions.
Right. So we have a military anomaly, a media cover-up, and these 2 accounts of highly classified operations around a massive subterranean structure made of ancient black stone. Now, we move from the story to the physics. What did the engineers learn about how this dark pyramid actually works?
Marty Johnson, the engineer from 1959, he provided these remarkably specific details about the structure. It really suggests he was either deeply involved in the schematics or he just had an exceptional memory for detail.
He confirmed the size from the seismic data, 550 feet tall, with the base about 700 feet below the surface, which means the military base they were in was at least 700 feet deep, built around the massive base of this thing.
But crucially, he gave a geometrical specification that, in the world of theoretical physics, is incredibly significant. He emphasized that the pyramid's angles were precisely 48 degrees. And he specifically noted that this was not the typical 45 degrees, and it wasn't the 51.8-degree angle of the Great Pyramid of Giza.
So why is 48 degrees so important?
Well, in esoteric geometry and some theories about acoustic or resonant energy, specific angles are believed to act as, focusing lenses for the Earth's natural energy fields.
Exactly. In the context of these pyramid power theories, which basically state that geometry can influence localized energy fields, that 48-degree angle is sometimes cited as having a specific resonance, a frequency that correlates to certain low-frequency acoustic waves that travel through the Earth's crust.
So the idea is that it's theorized to maximize the collection of energy. It's like a giant parabolic reflector pointing deep into the Earth, or maybe towards a specific celestial alignment.
And the fact that they place control rooms precisely at the 4 corners of the structure, and that those rooms were designed only to measure the energy flowing through it, that confirms the military viewed the structure itself as the primary engine.
The idea that this geometry generates power is the whole basis of the military operation, and that leads us to this staggering claim from Marty Johnson's son, which tries to move this from theory into actual observation.
Right. Johnson's son, he wanted to validate his father's story. So he built a small replica of the pyramid out of aluminum, following the exact 48-degree angle and the proportional specs his father had laid out.
And the result of this little experiment, according to the sources, was this amplification effect. When he ran a small controlled amount of voltage through the aluminum structure, the output was magnified. It generated enough sustained electricity to power their entire house and farm.
That is a colossal claim of energy gain. And while we don't have any external peer review of this specific experiment, the hypothesis is that the pyramid geometry doesn't create energy. It acts as an extremely efficient transducer, pulling energy from a source we don't normally tap into.
And the source material says the primary goal of the whole project was energy distribution. So the military was trying to hook this massive relic up to the U.S. power grid.
And if that one pyramid can power a country, then the whole scale of this thing just expands globally. This is where the narrative shifts into the concept of the ancient energy grid.
The theory is that the Dark Pyramid in Alaska isn't an isolated structure. It's part of a global network connected to structures in Egypt, Indonesia like Gunung Padang, and potentially other places that were all built in ancient times with these precise geometrical specs.
And the energy source, as we hinted at, is the zero-point field. Now, for you listening, the zero-point field, or ZPF, is an incredibly complex concept from quantum field theory, but we can simplify it.
Yeah, basically, in classical physics, a vacuum empty space has zero energy. But in quantum mechanics, based on the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, even a vacuum is never truly empty. Subatomic particles are constantly popping in and out of existence, creating this residual energy.
That is the zero-point energy,
Yeah.
or vacuum energy. And theoretically, it exists everywhere in the universe in immense quantities.
So the ancient energy grid theories suggest these pyramids were designed as massive planetary antennae. They used their specific geometry and materials, like the black stone, to pull electricity right from this quantum field and then transmit it globally.
It's the ultimate free energy cover-up. Potentially limitless clean power that would make all conventional sources totally obsolete. And if the Alaskan pyramid is thousands of years old, as they claim, this technology predates the Industrial Revolution and suggests a lost, hyper-advanced global civilization.
Which brings us back to that central contradiction. If the U.S. military found this functioning, limitless power generator, why didn't they solve the world's energy crisis? Why the intense secrecy and the aggressive suppression of the news?
And this is where the narrative brings in the non-human element.
To explore this, we have to briefly talk about the highly classified CIA-funded psychic spying program known as Project Stargate. And one of the most famous and successful remote viewers from that project was a guy named Pat Price.
Price famously used his abilities to view an underground base hidden deep within the Alaska Triangle, specifically inside Mount Hayes, or Mother Hayes, and he concluded that this base was a collaboration, jointly operated by humans and aliens.
And the Alaska Triangle is already internationally notorious. It has over 6,500 recorded UFO sightings. It's one of the most active hotspots in the world.
Right, so investigative journalist Linda Moulton Howe, whom Michler contacted, she followed this lead. She found a witness who performed a remote viewing session, specifically targeting the Dark Pyramid site. Now, remote viewing is a controversial method, but the consistency of the details provided often lines up with these insider accounts.
So what did the vision show?
It was sequential. It started with a small surface-level building, the elevator going down hundreds of feet. Then it showed the standard military facility labs, offices, sleeping quarters, suggesting a robust, ongoing human presence. And then the structure itself. The huge, black, sloped wall of the Dark Pyramid, surrounded by lights, equipment, and technicians working on it.
The key piece of information came during a simulated tour of the facility. The remote viewer asked to see the person in charge, the facility leader.
And the conclusion was unequivocal. The individual was bipedal, humanoid, but definitively not human. And they had authority over the human personnel.
And this leads to the ultimate, chilling conclusion about the pyramid's true function, according to this line of inquiry. The structure isn't really a power plant for the human grid.
Instead, it acts as a colossal, zero-point energy device that functions specifically as a charging station for UFOs.
Which would explain the massive density of UFO activity in the Alaska Triangle. It's a huge, ancient, interstellar gas station.
And it provides the cynical explanation for why the military couldn't get it to work for them. They never got it to work consistently because the aliens are in charge. The implication is that humans are just the security, the engineers, the maintenance crew for a facility that services a non-human client base.
It all comes back to that dark phrase, we work for them.
Now, these claims are extraordinary. I mean, ancient black stone, intergalactic charging stations. We have to ground this back in physical reality. Is there any verifiable evidence on the surface?
Lee Pearson's son, Bruce Pearson, decided he was going to find out using the location details from his father.
Right, so Bruce Pearson had the general coordinates. East of Vanilla Crete, roughly west of Mount Denali, deep in the Alaskan interior. And his hypothesis was simple. If a massive, multi-decade, highly classified underground base exists, there has to be some logistical infrastructure on the surface, no matter how hard they tried to hide it.
So Bruce hired a plane and flew low over the target area, just scanning the pristine, frozen wilderness for any sign of artificial intervention. And in a place as big as Alaska, the slightest unnatural thing just stands out.
And he found several things that just did not belong and were not on any official maps. First, he found a patch of land that looked squared off. It wasn't natural. It had clear right angles, straight lines. Evidence of industrial earth-moving or construction where the land should be completely jagged and random.
And second, as he was circling the area, he spotted the distinct remains of an old road, a road that is not listed on any U.S. Geological Survey maps or any other public records.
Which implies a significant logistical effort, moving heavy materials, concrete, steel, personnel for the 1959 facility into that area.
And third, and maybe the most critical find, was an old airstrip, completely unmapped and clearly abandoned. The presence of an airstrip confirms that at some point, a massive logistical operation was running in that precise area for a long time.
And this infrastructure was in extreme isolation. The nearest marked official road is almost 100 miles away. These coordinates were then corroborated by another retired Navy officer who said he flew over that exact area and his instruments registered massive, off-the-charts electromagnetic energy readings.
Confirming a potent artificial source right under the ground where Pearson had found the old base perimeter.
So the combination of the insider accounts and this verifiable physical infrastructure, the squared-off land, the road, the airstrip, it suggests that regardless of what the pyramid is, a monumental secret military installation operated in this exact patch of unsurveyed land for decades.
But these physical searches have come with grave risks. And the most chilling modern part of this story is the case of Nathan Campbell. In May of 2020, Campbell took the ultimate risk. He hired a pilot to fly him to Kerry Lake in Denali National Park, which is just a few miles from the alleged pyramid coordinates that Bruce Pearson had identified.
And Campbell was not some ill-prepared amateur. He was prepared for a long solo trek. He arranged for a pickup 4 months later. He had top-tier gear, plenty of food, and critically, a satellite communicator to check in with his family. This was a calculated, responsible expedition.
But after only a few weeks, the check-ins just stopped. A full-scale search was mounted, and they eventually found his campsite. All his gear was there, which suggested no struggle or sudden flight. It was all packed and secured, but Nathan was gone.
And the most disturbing piece of evidence was his diary. The final entry, written in the middle of this multi-month solo expedition, was just stark in its brevity. Went to get water.
A fully prepared man walking a few yards from his secure campsite to get water, and he just vanishes without a trace. The speculation is understandable and, frankly, terrifying.
Yeah, that he found the physical entrance or the perimeter of the Dark Pyramid and was subsequently deleted by the unseen security forces.
And we have to re-emphasize the context here. This location is deep within the infamous Alaska Triangle, an area where, tragically, thousands of people go missing every year. So whether Campbell was a victim of the wilderness or a secret military security detail or the NSA agent mentioned, his fate is like a modern warning label for this entire location.
We've covered a lot of ground here, moving from a seismic anomaly to Men in Black and Blackstone charting stations. So before we end, we have to do the crucial part of any deep dive, the critical analysis. Where does this narrative hold up and where does it start to fracture?
Yeah, we have to shift from just reporting the claims to analyzing the validity of the witnesses and the data. And that requires rigorous skepticism, even when the story is this compelling.
Let's start with Doug Muckler. He's the linchpin, the source of the initial cover-up story. And believers correctly point to his credibility because he provided documents, including his DD Form 214.
Which is the certificate of release from active duty. It's the gold standard of proof in the military community. It verifies his rank, his assignments, Fort Richardson 172nd Infantry Brigade, and his record as a counterintelligence officer. So his identity and his presence in Alaska in 1989, those are verifiable facts.
However, the source material also notes that we have to view all military intelligence whistleblowers, Mushler, Elizondo, Grush, with a degree of critical skepticism. And that's not because they're inherently liars. It's because the counterintelligence community is notoriously adept at compartmentalization and, if necessary, intentional disinformation.
So Muchler might be relaying his truth, but that truth could contain subtle, layered inaccuracies that are designed to obscure the full picture.
And the most significant factual challenge is the timeline of that initial seismic reveal. Muchler distinctly claimed the news report about the pyramid happened in late November or early December 1992, right after a Chinese nuclear test.
But the historical records show a pretty big discrepancy, about 6 months. The Chinese underground nuclear test actually happened on May 22, 1992. There was no recorded underground test by China in the final months of that year.
And that's a critical fracture point. Mushler came forward with his story decades later. It is highly possible, just based on the psychology of memory, that he's conflating two events. He accurately remembered two major things, but incorrectly fused them together.
So what was the other event?
Well, the global event that was generating immense news coverage, UN aid requests, and lots of talk about pyramids in October 1992 was the major earthquake that hit Egypt. It caused damage to the Sphinx and the Great Pyramids.
So his mind might have correctly linked the initial seismic shockwave from May with a separate, intense news cycle about pyramids and global scrutiny in October, creating a single false memory that placed the Alaskan reveal in December.
Right. It compromises the exact timing of the cover-up, but not necessarily the fact that a discovery was made and then covered up.
And what about the other soldiers?
That's the other key point. While Muchler claims nearly 40 other soldiers saw that 6 o'clock news broadcast, not one of those people has ever come forward to corroborate the story independently, not even anonymously.
Which suggests that either the threat was so severe that every single person stayed silent for decades, or the actual number of witnesses was significantly smaller than Muchler remembered.
Now, if we shift to the claims about the base operation, the accounts from Marty Johnson and Lee Pearson are the most detailed and technically focused, but they are strictly secondhand, transmitted entirely through their sons.
And that is a massive limitation in terms of hard evidence. While the sons, Bruce Pearson and Marty Johnson's son, are strong, motivated witnesses relaying these incredibly specific details like the 48-degree angle, the EMP effect, the black stone, we're still relying entirely on anecdotal testimony.
We lack physical logs, photos, journals from the original participants.
It does raise a critical question, though. Is it possible that the fathers, knowing they could never officially disclose the truth, intentionally planted specific, traceable technical details like the 48-degree angle or the aluminum replica amplification to create a narrative that their families could safely pursue later?
It's a compelling thought. Creating a detailed, specific story rather than just saying, I worked on a secret thing, it does suggest an intent to leave a breadcrumb trail. If the details are accurate, like the theoretical function of that 48-degree geometry, it validates the depth of the knowledge they shared, even if the primary source is gone.
Finally, we have to look at the investigative framework that brought this story out. Notably, the work of Linda Moulton Howe. She's a highly respected, Emmy-winning journalist, often credited with breaking foundational stories in the UFO and anomalous phenomena community.
And she is rigorous in some respects. She insists on verifying documents, like the DD-214. However, the critical perspective points out that she often approaches a story already believing it to be true. A true believer approach.
And that cognitive bias can lead to focusing on evidence that supports the narrative, Muchler's DD-214, the remote viewing details, while maybe minimizing evidence that contradicts it, like that timeline discrepancy.
Which is where a different, often more productive investigative approach comes in, the concept of critical defense. Instead of starting with belief, the investigator starts with rigorous skepticism, but commits fully to finding evidence to defend the hard-to-believe story.
So you flip the methodology.
Exactly. You don't ask, is the pyramid real? You ask, if the pyramid is real, what piece of evidence is the hardest to dismiss and why?
And when you apply that here, the specific technical claims, the 48-degree angle, the localized EMP, and the verifiable unmapped infrastructure that Bruce Pearson found, those become the strongest defense points. It forces a skeptic to acknowledge that something highly unusual and highly protected was there. Even if the timeline of the Chinese test is wrong, the infrastructure is physically present.
So the story of the Dark Pyramid exists in this fascinating space where verifiable military actions, redaction, cover-ups, unmapped infrastructure collide with these extraordinary, technically detailed but secondhand claims of free energy, ancient black stone, and non-human collaboration.
So we've reached the bottom of this deep dive into the Dark Pyramid of Alaska. The narrative remains one of the most compelling syntheses of the verifiable and the fantastic in the history of deep classification.
On one hand, you have the undisputed facts. Verifiable military service records from Doug Muckler, which establishes the setting and the existence of that map anomaly. You also have Bruce Pearson's discovery of unmapped, squared-off land, an old road, and airstrip.
Suggesting a massive, sustained, and secret infrastructure existed exactly where the anomaly was detected.
But these hard facts are juxtaposed against these extraordinary claims. The pyramid is 550 feet tall, built of ancient black stone, designed with a specific 48-degree angle and capable of generating limitless energy from the zero-point field.
And finally, the ultimate claim that it functions as a UFO charging station, operated under the supervision of a non-human entity.
The final synthesis remains tantalizing. If the Dark Pyramid is real, its claimed function as an energy accumulator is completely consistent with these fringe theories suggesting ancient, geometrically precise structures like Giza were designed not as tombs, but as devices capable of generating and transmitting high-magnitude energy across a planetary grid.
And that leads us back to the most critical piece of intelligence we gained from this whole story. Muchler's confrontation at the NSA archive, where he was explicitly warned not to mess with them up there anymore.
So we leave you, the learner, with this final provocative thought. Given the military's immediate and aggressive efforts to suppress that initial news report, and their absolute refusal to acknowledge the operation, the question isn't just what they're hiding in Alaska. Is it clean power or alien tech?
The fundamental question is who is ultimately driving the secrecy. If the Dark Pyramid is truly a working technology, but one that is only accessible or functional for non-human entities, is the U.S. military truly running the base? Or are they simply acting as the mandated armed security detail for a colossal secret that they possess but cannot control?